Big Bend National Park is an awe-inspiring destination with unparalleled wilderness. It's one of the most remote and least visited national parks, providing a sense of solitude and escape from crowds. Its vast expanses of rugged desert, mountains, and canyons offer a true wilderness experience with hiking, river trips, wildlife viewing, and stargazing. And if that's too much, you can just take a soak in a hot spring. It's one of the must-do things in Big Bend. Plate tectonics and volcanoes shaped this whole area, and they created the natural plumbing system that's responsible for the hot springs. They come to the surface at the park's east side and empty into the Rio Grande. They're about a 30-minute drive from the Panther Junction Visitor Center. The last 2 miles are on well-maintained gravel. As I drive it, I'm going to tell you how a man with health problems and a dream made this desolate place a resort. In 1909, J.O. Langford heard the call to go west, from Mississippi, where he caught malaria and digestive ailments. While in Alpine, Texas, he heard about the healing properties of a hot spring 120 miles to the south, and started what would be a 10-day trip that would end on this very road. It wasn't hard to find the spring because someone in the past had made a coffin-like stone tub in the Rio Grande right at the outlet to capture the 105-degree spring water. There was another family already here, and he let them stay there rent-free in exchange for free labor. Others had stayed here too. He used the remains of an old stone-lined dugout as a base for a house. Well, he just put a tent over it. And that would be the home for his wife, his 18-month-old daughter, and there was another child on the way. Ranchers and others had eked out a living in the area for many years. And he heard from them that the Indians, and yes, that was an acceptable term back then, would take a soak in the springs every day for 21 days, and even drink from it occasionally, and that this would cure any ailment. So that's what he did. And after just a few days, he started feeling better. He bragged he could even eat beans and chili and still sleep through the night. The locals saw how his health improved, and soon they were paying J.O. 25 cents to soak in the spring. So many came to take the cure that he was able to build an adobe house 150 feet above the river for his growing family. The next year was even better. He built a stone bathhouse over the spring. But in 1912, Mexican bandits forced him to flee to El Paso. He's glad he did because just a few years later, Panco Villa came across the Mexican border and got into skirmishes with the U.S. Army, not far from here. It took a while for things to calm down, but the Langfords returned in 1927. Only the bathhouse foundation remained. The area was safe now, and the road network had greatly improved. And with a Model A, the springs became less than a day away from lots of potential customers. So he rebuilt the bathhouse, then built a general store, and then a 7-room motel that he called a motor court. He charged $1 a night for the rooms, and still 25 cents to use the bathhouse. With the help of questionable ads, guests came from across the country to be cured of just about anything. The Langfords continued to operate the resort until 1942, when they sold out to the state of Texas, who donated the land to the Park Service. Big Bend National Park was established 2 years later. After they sold out, they moved out. Today, it's hard to believe that a young family could survive out here. It's even more surprising that plenty of others did so as well. Wildlife Park, it's time to wrap up this history lesson. Someone has told me I have to insert this.
This video is sponsored by Steve's 401k. Please help to support this channel by clicking like and subscribe to access more quality content like this. Leave a comment. He responds to all subscribers.
Thank you, Christy. The lot today is much as it was 100 years ago, except for the wheelchair-accessible vault toilet. And that palm tree. It's next to the general store. And I know that was a lot, but now we're finally going to the springs. The retail tradition continues right at the trailhead. Locals are allowed to cross the river and sell handmade crafts in the park. The info sign tells us that the hot springs are just a half-mile away. And there's a loop trail that takes us to the hot springs, then up the 120-foot ridge back to here. Then there's another sign that's not quite as inviting, but it's an important one. I double-checked to make sure my doors were locked. In 1968, the state of Texas commissioned a history lesson on this area, and that's where I got most of the black and white pictures for this story. This is a shot from an airplane in the 1930s. And that windmill? It provided the only drinkable water for the guests and the Langfords. This is the general store. Back in the day, this was the community gathering spot, and I had been here before, about 35 years ago. The palm tree has grown quite a bit since then, and the old post office sign has apparently fallen off. It is interesting to see how things change. The info signs in this park are really good. You should take a look at every one of them when you have a chance. The post office seems to have been reconstructed since my last visit. Those rafters look pretty new to me. Does it say when they rebuilt it? I was here 35 years ago, and it was falling apart. It was. After the Langfords left, a Maggie Smith continued to run it for about 10 years. But in 1952, she retired, and it's been empty ever since. And the area we're walking in now used to be the gathering place for the community, especially on Mondays, when the mail would arrive from Marathon, which is about 100 miles to the north. This is the motor court. These are the rooms that he rented for $1 a day, and he still charged another 25 cents to soak in the spring. The rooms are quite simple. There is no bathroom, but several of the rooms are decorated with Western-themed murals. They were painted by Etta Livingston, who lived in that stone house we saw just above the parking lot. And the Rio Grande is just a couple of 100 feet away. But there's no immigrant crisis here. There's no crowds. There was no mass crossings. It's all perfectly safe. And I don't know where the outhouse was. The rooms are sheltered by the cliff. And the trail to the springs? It starts at the end of the motor court, next to an amazingly layered limestone cliff that tells its own unique story that I'll talk about once we get to the springs. This is another one of those important info signs. It says that little stairways on the trail lead to incredibly old pictographs and petroglyphs made hundreds of years ago by Native Americans. This is one of those little stairways. And I forgot to hit the record button for some reason, so I have to show you a photo. Those wheel marks are from a powered wheelchair. But the little girl in the wheelchair managed to get through it, thanks to a couple of helpful pushes from her dad. The trail gets a little tricky here. After a few steps through some brush, the trail hugs the Rio Grande, which, in March, when I shot this, it was really low and, frankly, not that grand. It took just 5 to 10 minutes to get here. And yes, all that shrubbery on the other side, that's Mexico. I don't know if the Park Service or if our old friend J.O. Langford made the retaining wall for this section of the trail, but it would be very tricky without it. The trail then gets very close to all those layers that were laid down when the Western Interior Seaway went through here, and that seaway stretched all the way to Canada. If you look close, you might find a seashell or some other kind of fossil. From time to time, we need to be reminded of the power of Mother Nature, and these rock layers can do just that. They were all formed on the sea floor, and today we're walking at about 2,000 feet above sea level. Yep, Mother Nature is very powerful. This is the hot springs area. The old bathhouse foundation is now a sitting area. To reduce the creepy factor, I kept the camera back away from the bathers, and I didn't have time to take a dip myself. But by the way, when I was here 35 years ago, I was the only one here. In 1936, about 250,000 gallons of 105-degree water flowed through the bathhouse. These days, it's a bit less. And by the way, there's no sulfur smell, but the hot water does contain several minerals that dissolve during the hundreds of years it takes to flow through the convoluted plumbing system that was created 18+ million years ago when the land here tried to pull itself apart during its basin and range phase. It's the same phase that gave us the tilted ridges that are visible from the main park road. And somehow, knowing all that makes that crude little pool look a lot prettier. You don't have to go back the same way you came. You can take the long way back up a loop trail that heads up this ridge and provides a nice view of the river from 120 feet up. Now, if you were looking closely earlier, you may have noticed that the cliffs around here are all made up of alternating layers of sandy-colored rock, called limestone, and a loose silty layer, These layers tell a very interesting story. These days, some people are concerned about rising sea levels, caused in part by melting ice. Well, each of these layers record a sea level change. When the water was low, limestone deposits formed in deep water. Between the limestone layers, there's this sandy, muddy layer. They were put down, or deposited, as a geologist would say. In this one ridge, which can be seen near the trailhead, there's evidence that the sea level rose and fell at least 30 times. And of course, you may be wondering, what sea am I talking about? After all, we're 425 miles from the Gulf of Mexico. Well, it was our old friend, the Western Interior Seaway, which existed between 100 and 72 million years ago. Big Bend's hot springs are great fun for the whole family, and a soothing way to relax after a hiking day. It's also a place with lots of history, and thanks to one family's perseverance, it's a place where we can make a memory to enhance our own.
Have you subscribed yet? No, really, have you?